And so with this new generation, this new age, we're so aware of what's going on all the time. And it can seem quite scary. We open the newspaper and there's always bad news, it's always doom and gloom. But to be honest, I have to point out that a lot of this doom and gloom isn't happening to me. I'm very privileged. I'm a white, cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied, neurotypical, middle class, privately educated, university-educated, British, social media influencer. That last bit's a little bit awkward. I would have said content creator, but you're about to watch my PowerPoint, and I don't think you would have let that slide, pun intended. We're going to come back to influence in a minute, because right now we're going to talk about another term that gets bandied about and often shoved in my direction, which is snowflake. And I don't think I necessarily agree with Anna Rutherford's Urban Dictionary definition. I won't go so far as to say it offends me, but that does come with the territory. So I think what's happening at the minute is we're becoming more inclusive. I think what snowflakeism, if I may make that a term, is showing us is that we no longer think we know it all. We're recognizing that by diversifying opinions, having more access to disparate and different voices, we're able to make this world more inclusive, more diverse, and better all round. So I actually think being a snowflake is really cool, and I all think that we should embrace it and, ignore Anna. So as I've mentioned, a lot of my work that I do is on social media, and I know that that's scary in its own right. You might log in the morning and you'll see that someone's gone for a run at 6 a.m., had a green smoothie, had a facial, got engaged, got married, had a baby, bought a house, all before you've even had time to wash your hair, and it can be quite overwhelming. And I know that people like myself and the Kardashians, influencers, people selling you detox teas, I don't do that, can add into this pressure. And that this technology, we're being told all the time, is so bad for us. And I do agree, social media has got bad sides to it. But what I think we're also not recognizing is that without social media, we wouldn't be able to see so many different viewpoints and understand so much more. And whilst media outlets are always telling us the negative sides of things, it means it's sometimes harder to see the facts. As Hans Rosling says here, I don't know if you've read the book Factfulness, but it's amazing. As I brought up, media often tells us the negative spin on stuff. Let's talk about Me Too, it's awful. Or is it amazing, actually, that we're able to hear these stories from women? The stories might be awful, but the fact that they're even being told is incredible. If we were living in a totalitarian state, we wouldn't be able to argue with our neighbor, let alone with someone that lived halfway across the world. So that in of itself, that connectivity and that ability to share story, because we are storytellers as humans, that's how we navigate this earth, that's a sign of progress, and that's really important. In my professional PowerPoint, I've included this beautiful image of butterflies because I really believe in the butterfly effect. I actually didn't mean to do that, but my shirt's quite butterfly-y. And I believe that basically we can all have an impact. I think if you plant a seed, something will grow. Now, you might be cringing that I'm an influencer. It is quite cringe. I tend to not tell people if they ask. I say I'm a podcaster, freelance writer, speaker. I tend to leave influencer to the side. But just so you can all be involved with me, I think you're all influencers too, sorry. Because you don't need a platform, you don't need a stage, and you don't need 1 million followers. I don't have that either. All you need is a voice. And we're lucky enough that we're educated. We've got so much privilege already. All of you sat in this room have probably been through university. And what that gives you is something that the majority of the world will never be able to access until now, because we've got the ability to share. And that is incredible. So you don't need to be talking on stages like this, but you might just be sat around the table with your family and your granddad might make a comment that you think's actually, it's a bit racist, but he's old and can't be asked to say anything. Say something. Or your co-worker might say something to a friend which you think is quite sexist, but you're not sure if you should say something. But you should say something. It doesn't have to be calling out, it doesn't have to be negative, but there's a way that you can use language to make the world a bit better. Coming back to technology, it might seem like it's really scary, but it's actually doing great things. It's bringing us new narratives, new spaces, and new conversations. Technology is only scary if the people using it are bad. Technology isn't inherently moral, it isn't good or bad, unless the people using it are good or bad. And so if we can create a society or a world that has a good influence, then we can trust in our technology. If we can trust in our party leaders, our politicians, our coders, who will probably be sat in this room, then we don't need to worry about robots taking over, because hopefully they'll be a good influence too. And you don't have to be someone with a PhD or someone who is a leader of a political party to have a voice. Greta Thunberg's 16, and she's now kind of the face of climate change. She's incredible. She's spoken at the UN, and her videos get watched by millions of people online. But that isn't really the only thing about her. She has Asperger's, and in one of her speeches, she said it's a gift. I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone with autism. And the only time I really hear about this developmental disorder is when people say they don't want to vaccinate their children because they're scared that they'll get autism. If you were living with autism, the only rhetoric you ever heard was how scared people were that they would risk their child's lives by not immunizing them. It's not a very nice tale to hear, is it? And yet one 16-year-old girl standing up and saying, this is a gift, that could change the outlook and lives of millions of people. And that's how powerful language and words can be in really small ways. And again, I know that social media, I'm trying to give it a good edge because it's kind of my industry and I feel I've got to back it up a bit. I know that it's the thing that might be making us a bit more lonely. We're living in a loneliness epidemic, and that's not great. And we need to turn up IRL as much as we do online. That's in real life, for those of you who aren't up to date. And we've seen this with this Extinction Rebellion. And we've seen that we get together when we have a purpose. And if our purpose is making the world a better place, and I think that's the best time to show up, use your voice, use your privilege, and recognize that the smallest little thing you have to say could have the greatest impact, just like a little butterfly fluttering its wings. And again, with technology, we all often hear how awful it can be. And another thing we hear is one side of the story. So for instance, when we hear about Africa, we hear about it as if it's one country, one place that we've got to save. White saviors go over there and we're looking after all the people that are living in famine. But that's obviously not true. That's just one created idea. Really, in Africa, mobile banking is revolutionizing the economy there. It's meaning that people who previously didn't have access to banks don't need the infrastructure of a building or a banking agency. They can just go with their phone, log in virtually for free, and send and receive money. And that gives agency and empowers people. So that's an incredible use of technology in a place where we don't hear about them becoming a new, more developed place. We just hear about how amazing we are for helping them out. So this is a little bit cringy, but I do love a little slogan or two. And I know that I'm not doing amazing things. I don't necessarily change people's lives. But I do know, and I've learned from being in a place where people are watching me and listening to what I say, that sometimes if you can just be a bit more inclusive, a little bit kinder, and a little bit more open to the prospect of recognizing your own power, you really can make a difference. And if we're at a time when we don't necessarily know if we believe in our political leaders, and there is a bit of questioning around systemic injustice that is governing the world that we live in, then why don't we recognize that we as people have power to make this place a little bit better, a little bit happier, and a little less scary for the future? Because tomorrow might be today, but we could make tomorrow better than today. Thank you.